So you're thinking about retiring in Panama, or maybe you're dreaming about relocating to Costa Rica. By now, you probably watched a ton of YouTube videos and you probably have a ton of questions. And I get it. I was just like that before I visited Panama and before I visited Costa Rica, which is why I created a series of videos about retiring in Panama and a series of videos about living in Costa Rica. And since posting those videos, I've received a ton of comments and a ton of questions about both of those Central American countries. And so in today's video, I'm going to break down the answers to some of your most commonly asked questions related to real estate, healthcare, and even learning Spanish. Welcome back to Almost Retired Abroad. If you're new here, I'm Kimberly, and I created this channel to share my experience as I do the research to live, travel, work, and eventually retire abroad. And like I said, I got a ton of questions about all kinds of things, and we're just going to go ahead and get to the list. So the first question is it better to rent or to buy property? And I got this question about both Panama and Costa Rica. And again, this is just my personal opinion based off the research that I've done and my visits to both countries. I think it's absolutely essential that you rent before you buy, just because you might find in either country that the style of construction, the style of building may be different to what you're used to, whether you're coming from the United States or Canada or the UK or some other places in Europe. You may find things are a little bit more different than you're used to, and you might not know what to look out for. It's kind of like, if you're from the US and you're living in Minnesota and then you move down to Florida, you're not going to know what to look for as it relates to AC, mold, and all kinds of different things, right? So it's best to just rent when you first get there and kind of get a feel for some of the different areas, because it would be terrible if you bought a place and then realized that you either hated the location or the place looked nice, but it actually wasn't up to the standards that you were hoping. So, all right. So then the next question, when purchasing a home in Panama, do you have to pay cash or can you take out a mortgage? So the short answer is yes. You could do either one. So it's really going to depend on what kind of visa that you're getting. There's some visas where if you're making a real estate purchase, then you need to pay cash. It is possible to get a mortgage in Panama, but the rules and regulations are different than what you might find in the US. You will generally have to put more money down than you would normally be putting down in the US. The other thing too, again, not to get too in the weeds on this because I'm not a financial advisor, I'm not a mortgage lender, this is not financial advice. But one thing about when you get a mortgage in Panama is the fact that a lot of the banks will also require you to have life insurance because they want to make sure they're going to get paid if you should pass away. So they typically want you to have a life insurance policy for the cost of the mortgage, and it typically has to be paid off by the time that you're 70. So if you're moving to Panama as a retiree, you may already be 70 years old or approaching it, and you may not have the time to pay that off before, pay off the mortgage before you're 70. So it's just something to keep in mind. Again, this is why it's so important to talk specifically to an immigration attorney to find out what visa you qualify for. And then also when you make your trip, your scouting trip, it's important to talk to real estate professionals to get a better feel for what's out there and what you feel comfortable with based on your own personal financial situation. If you're finding value in this video, please consider giving it a like. It helps YouTube to recommend it to other viewers just like you who are also looking for information about living, traveling, and working abroad. Thanks. Now back to the video. So the next question I got about both countries. How is the cell service in Panama and Costa Rica? So I had zero issues whatsoever with the cell phone service in Panama or in Costa Rica. When I visited both of those places, I was using my Verizon phone. I had a Verizon plan where I was paying for an international day pass. So I only paid for the days that I knew I was going to need access to cell phone service. Other than that, I was mostly just using Wi-Fi because I'm cheap and I didn't want to pay for every single day. But if you're going to be staying there long term, it might be a good idea to look into getting an eSIM. When you get there on the ground, you can get a SIM card. There's a number of companies that allow you to buy it online ahead of time, such as Airalo and Jetpack. I haven't used either of them, but some of my friends haven't had any issues with either of them. And so that might be something that you might want to do because it is a lot cheaper, because you can pay for 30 days worth of data in whatever country that you want to go to for one flat fee. So definitely do some research about that before doing your scouting trip because you don't want to get any surprises on your cell phone bill when you return back to your home country. All right, the next question. Can you drink the tap water in Panama or Costa Rica for that matter? So, while there are some differences in infrastructure between Panama and Costa Rica, you can drink the water in both countries. I had zero issues or problems with the water in either country. I drank tap water, I had ice, I drank water at restaurants, I drank coffee, and I had no problems at all. All right, so one of the questions that I got asked, and I've been asked in just about every video that I've posted about my time in Costa Rica and Panama, is if I want to live in this area, do I need to learn how to speak Spanish? If you're moving to a country where Spanish is the national language, you might want to learn to speak Spanish. I mentioned in one of my first videos that I actually was in Costa Rica because I was learning Spanish at a local language institute. And actually, one of the questions that I got recently was asking about Spanish immersion. Do I recommend either Panama or Costa Rica for Spanish immersion? And do I know of any specific language immersion schools? So I actually went to Intercultura in Costa Rica in Heredia City. Where I was taking Spanish immersion. I found it immensely helpful. If you're planning on moving to any Spanish speaking country, I highly recommend immersion. I took Spanish in high school. I took Spanish in college. Used all the different language learning apps, and I had the most exponential amount of growth in my ability to speak Spanish when actually being immersed. It was a very large amount of growth in a very short period of time. And so as far as like, where is the best place to learn Spanish? That's really all going to depend on you and your preferences. I personally ended up choosing Costa Rica because I always wanted to visit Costa Rica, but also after doing my research, I found out that Costa Rica has one of the more neutral accents for Latin American Spanish. And so I thought that would be helpful. I have found that in my research that Colombia has a fairly neutral accent as well, whereas some other countries, the dialects are going to be a little bit more specific to their country. But if you have a specific country in mind, honestly, I'd recommend going to that specific country because, for example, like in Latin America, if you're thinking about moving to Argentina, Chile, or Uruguay, they have a very specific way of speaking Spanish that's not necessarily the same as some of the other surrounding countries. Or if you're moving to any of the Spanish-speaking countries in the Caribbean, they all have their own different dialects and slang and different words that while are really helpful there, they may not be used in other places you might be visiting or moving to. All right, so if you would like more information about Spanish immersion or some different tips and tricks and things that I've used to learn how to speak Spanish, even over the age of 40, please comment Spanish lessons in the comments below, and I'll be sure to do a future video talking more about my study abroad experience, as well as some tips and tricks that I've used not only to learn Spanish, but to try to stay current now that I'm no longer in Costa Rica. All right, moving on to the next question. So one person asked, I might have missed it, but did you cover the cost of living in Panama compared to the USA? Thank you. So yes, but no. So I did not cover the exact cost of living between Panama and the United States, but depending upon which video you've watched, if you watched the one about city versus suburbs, living by the beach, or living in Boquete, then you've seen some specific examples of real estate options, both for sale and for rent in those areas. So you would obviously need to look at that to determine if those prices make sense for your budget. I didn't do a direct comparison to the USA because that's relative. You know, like if you live in New York City and you live in upstate New York, the cost of rent is going to be completely different. So I don't know where you're coming from or what your desired lifestyle is or what your budget is. But if you are trying to do research and figure out how much it costs between one city and another city in another country, there is a website you can go to called Numbeo, which I can link down in the description, where you can put in actual names of cities and then compare them to other places so you'll get a general idea of the housing costs, utility costs, groceries, and so on. So that might help you a little bit better in narrowing some things down as you're doing your planning to potentially move abroad. All right, so moving on to the next question. How easy is it to have your car shipped? This could go for Panama, Costa Rica, or any other country. But for Panama and Costa Rica, so depending upon what type of visa that you have, you may have the opportunity to import some of your items duty-free or at a reduced price. Again, you want to talk to your attorney to find out all of the details on that. However, honestly, I don't recommend it because it's very, very, very expensive to have items shipped, whether you're talking about from the US or from Canada or from elsewhere. And you're going to find in both Panama and Costa Rica, most of the places come furnished, whether you're talking about rentals, or even in the case of purchasing, a lot of times the furniture is already included. And so I think it's just a good idea to kind of just stick with what's there in the place that you're moving to. If you're worried about your things and maybe there's some sentimental things or other things you want to ship, maybe rather than a big shipping container, maybe you want to just ship a few things. But it might be a good idea just to put some things in storage and test out the country that you want to move to first, because you might move to Panama or Costa Rica or Mexico or wherever it is you're thinking about moving to. You might move there and realize that it's not for you for whatever reason. And now you've paid all that money to have all your things shipped. Now you're going to have to pay all that money to have it all shipped back. So it's probably a good idea just to not have your items shipped, and then maybe make a decision down the road about what items are worth spending the extra money to bring to you and which items you might want to maybe donate or give away to, friends, family, etc. All right, next question. So if you move to Panama, are U.S. veteran benefits available? So the short answer is yes, but there's stipulations around that. So if you're a U.S. veteran and you have a disability from the VA, there are healthcare providers that you can utilize your VA benefits at, and I'm staying very high level on this because I don't have all the details on this. But if I were you, I would specifically talk to a VA counselor in the current place that you are living. I would ask them specifically about the VA Foreign Medical Program and find out which medical facilities are affiliated in Panama where you might be able to go, and then that this medical facility may file a claim with the VA to get reimbursed. But again, super high level information on this. Double check with a VA counselor to find out more about that VA Foreign Medical Program. But I know there are veterans living in Panama that are getting access to these things, but I don't have all the specifics on that, and I do not want to misadvise you. The next question: what is the best website for rentals in Panama? So if you've watched my videos about living in some of the different cities in Panama, or some of the potential rentals and homes to purchase in Costa Rica, then you've probably seen the website Encuentra 24. I personally feel like this is probably the best place to start, because if you're thinking about moving just about anywhere in Latin America, there is an Encuentra 24 site for that country. And I found the information to be pretty valid and pretty up to date. If you're looking in Panama specifically, there's a website called Acobir, which is the website that is the actual Panama MLS. So if you're trying to get to licensed realtors, you can find all those listings on Acobir. And then there's a whole bunch of different Panamanian real estate companies. In the previous videos that I've done where I've shown actual companies, all of them except one I've actually had dealings with and I haven't had any issues with. But again, do your own research and see which realtor might make the most sense for you. I've gotten a kind of a variation of this next question that is like, if it costs this amount of money to live in this specific neighborhood, how can people afford it in Panama if they can't work? So I think that with this question, it's really all going to depend on what kind of visa you have. I'm guessing that they're probably talking about the pensionado visa, because typically if you have a retiree visa, then you can't work. But there are other visa statuses that will allow you to get access to a work permit. So it's really a good idea. I know I keep saying this, but it's a good idea to talk to an immigration attorney and find out not only which visas you qualify for, but which ones make the most sense for you. Because just because you qualify for a specific visa doesn't necessarily mean it makes sense for your current life situation. Maybe you are old enough to retire, but you want to continue to work. Or maybe you are looking into the visas, and maybe the Friendly Nations visa with a real estate investment makes more sense for you. Or maybe opening a Panamanian company makes more sense for you. I don't know, but talking to an attorney, they can help you figure out what makes the most sense for you based upon your desired lifestyle in Panama and the type of visas that you qualify for. So I've gotten also a number of questions about things about, wanting to start the process of relocation, wanting more information, and how can they do this? Where can they go? Can I help them with that? So I cannot help you with that. Like I mentioned, I created Almost Retired Abroad to share the information that I've learned about living, traveling, and working abroad. And so I've done extensive research about both Costa Rica and Panama. I'm not a relocation specialist for either. I've shared a lot of different, websites and tools in this video and in some of the other videos in my series on both of those countries. I will say, though, that of the research that I've done, I've come across a few professionals that you might want to check out. Again, This video is not sponsored by them. I'm not endorsing them in any way, but I've been doing research on Panama since 2020, and I have found the website for Panama relocation tours to have the most accurate, up-to-date information. If you're thinking about moving to Costa Rica, there is a young lady named Sarah Elena who has a Costa Rica relocation channel on YouTube. She does help with relocations. I have not used her services, but one of my friends did, and she was able to help him to move to Costa Rica. In fact, he still lives there now. Again, this is not an endorsement on their services. This is just, people that I've come across that you might want to look into and see if potentially they can help you. So one other question that I got was, are you moving to Boquete, Panama? And the answer to that is no. So after doing my research, I quickly realized that Boquete is not the place for me. And stay tuned for an upcoming video where I'm going to share why I'm not moving to Boquete. I'm actually right now doing some research on Belize, which I would love to share with you guys in the next video. If you are interested in learning more about Belize, please comment Belize below, Belize below, and I will take that into consideration on my future videos. If you have any questions about Belize, I'd be happy to answer them as well. So, as always, I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.